Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And it has been a pretty interesting week when it comes to news in EVE Online, because we got basically the deployment of the first story arc that's really cemented into the game in the form of 2 races that will then lead up to the expansion coming in November. And so between Amar and Minmatar, there's basically a race around data in order to control a solar transmuter from the Triglavian that could then lead to significant technological progress for the winning empires, or empire I should say. And then there's also a race between the Galente and the Caldari in order to build stargates in the system of Athanon or something like that, which is part of faction warfare. And I find that to be very interesting. Because both sides can actually complete their gates. All it really takes is enough resources to be brought in, and if that would work, or even if that doesn't work, we will then have stargates in a system that will basically turn on and off depending on who is in control of that faction warfare system. And that could really be something that can be played around with, could be very interesting in my opinion. I personally kind of hope that both of them can get the Stargate up and running, because at that point, you could have this real rotation of a bridgehead right into low sec, into faction warfare for the empire that basically fights over that, or that controls that one. Should be pretty enticing to get some fights going. I personally have not gone over there just yet. It does feel like it's pretty risky business, so probably first order of business is going to be to take a look in a cloaky ship. And from what I can tell, Amar and Caldari are currently dominating the events surrounding those 2 races. But it is pretty cool. On top of that, there was also a mass test 2 days before that patch dropped, focusing a lot around the audio and the graphical updates for like large fleet fights and things like that. Well, there are still some problems to iron out in my opinion, especially on the audio front. The graphics front, I felt things were working quite well, especially going in and out of very busy regions in Warp was like a little bit more smooth. I mean, it still takes a big chunk of performance, but it did feel like you're just not dropping to like 5 frames or something like that. All of a sudden, it's a little bit more of a smooth transition. And then for the audio, I would say it's a really good change, because if you end up in a big fight, usually what people do is turn off the audio, because you just get crackling. Just the client really doesn't know what to do when there's like 1,000 ships doing stuff, and so that's gonna like be reduced to the most important sounds, and it makes everything a lot more bearable. Hell, even I think in some missions and some rooms in exploration, you sometimes get crazy audio when your camera is in the wrong spot. So overall, I think it's pretty damn good for the game, especially for the bigger fights and things like that. Any other news? Nothing that I really noticed. Oh, in fact, actually, yeah, of course, the Alliance tournament is starting. So yeah, lots of stuff actually happening, and it feels like now that we're reaching October, CCP has taken the month of September to get stuff going, and we're really starting to roll into the post-summer period with the expansion coming in November. So I'm really gonna keep an eye on everything, and I'm gonna try to get busy in the game and see how I can contribute, or maybe take advantage. There's definitely business opportunities when it comes to all of these events. Next up, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store, because of course last week we got that massive sale on Omega time. It's back to just 500 plex for Omega, and so you may already have noticed that on the ticker as well. Plex has done a pretty sharp drop back to where we were, so that's actually been absorbed as far as I can tell. Amar ships still front and center from the Amar celebrations, with sales on quite a few of them. Imperium Jubilee skins like the Damnation does look really cool in my opinion. And then on the services front, I think we are back to normal as the quarter has ended. I think some people are definitely of the opinion that that's what happened there. But let's get started then. Let's get to the market. Start with pilot services, and that's coming in at 455. like that. And of course we will start with plex, and I'll get you guys straight to the chart. So you can see here massive trade volume increase when CCP allowed you to plex an account for just 300 plex rather than 500 plex. That drove demand to crazy numbers, and the min-max prices went above 5.5 million. Some people even noticed periods where JITA was just sold out and it went up to like 7-8 million. So it was definitely a pretty crazy rush, but look at what we've done since then. A pretty nice drop off. I can even see today's daily average touching 4.5 million. So in JITA itself, it's 4.65 million for the sellers, 4.4 million for the buyers. Definitely a lower price there, and that's also what we're seeing in the Tranquility Trading Tower. And yeah, just it's the same range, so centering around 4.5 million at the moment, with, as far as I can tell today at least, a little bit of domination from people picking up plex from those buyers. And yeah, it was a very good week last week to sell some of plex at really crazy price. I think some people will have taken massive amounts of profits as well, but the fact that we can make it straight back to 4.5 million to me is also an indication that there is supply out there. So it's not like we completely ran dry because so many people plexed so many accounts and characters for long periods of time, although some people definitely did. So plex are basically back at that 4.5 million mark, and then the question really will become, what do you expect of the expansion? Maybe the alliance tournament, maybe something happening in like Nosik with larger alliances or something like that that could change this dynamic. And I think that's where we have to look now when it comes to potential changes in the plex market. This is the new reality though. 4.5 million for a plex at the current real life prices. That's just something we have to accept, I think. Next, we've got the multiple pilot training certificates that are basically pretty flat, slight uptick though, and heading for 1.88 million on the chart. It's 1.88 pretty much for the sellers and 1.76, so pretty damn narrow margin there between sellers and buyers. So still decent amount. Of course, volumes are not great, but they are pushing into those sell prices, having basically no choice. And I would say above 1.75 billion, the new normal range for these training certificates. Skill extractors, of course, pretty similar chart, with again a very significant increase in price, where in the first part of the year you could get one for less than 400 million at basically any time, and at the moment we got that bump up to 700 million as well on the crazy plex sale shenanigans. We are recovering from that, but here we're having a little bit of a tougher time. So let's take a quick look at what it was before that rush. 530, we are still at 550 million for the sellers, 516 for the buyers. And I think that's really the difference between plex and, for instance, now the skill extractors. There's not that much extra skill extractor in volumes available in the game to bring us right back to where we started, whereas plex actually does have those volumes available. The impact on the injectors should be up, and indeed they are up. Here are the large scale injectors touching 900 million ISK. The real question, of course, with that pullback in plex, is this something that the market can maintain? I personally don't think so, but sellers are definitely trying to make it happen. 910 million for the sellers of large scale injectors. Buyers though are trying to bring us back down with an 856 buyer. That's probably one of the larger margins we've seen in a while, and then these small scale injectors cannot stem the bleeding here, although also after a little bit of a delay we got basically a massive jump in just 4 days above 180, and now we're starting to drop off just a little bit. 187 million for the sellers, again trying to get a really good price. 173 million for the buyers. Still a little bit of pressure there, so we are seeing buyers willing to push up a little bit towards that 175, which would be up here. For the buyers, that's definitely not where they were before the big plex shenanigans, some would say, but event in the market from last week. So then we get the daily alpha injectors here starting to, I think, find their new range as well. You still have that same, right? May it changed, maybe it took a little bit of time because of that sale as well. That took some time to absorb, so they got like a delay of a couple months where daily alpha injectors were still below 50 million, but now we are back up, and 60 to 70 million could definitely become the new range considering the real life prices. 67 for the sellers, 62 million for the buyers, pretty damn narrow margin, just 5 million on something that 66 million is still quite small, and yeah, we are basically starting to move, I think, within this range. And then finally we've got the hypercores that also clearly now communicate with the plex market, right? So everything that's tied to pilot services, except for the daily alpha injectors, they are really their own thing, but almost everything else is basically tied to plex. And as a result, we also have a jump up to 600,000 disk. That is though finally absorbed pretty quickly, back to 487 for the sellers and 439, almost 440 for the buyers of the hypercores. So we got a little bit of a scare in the pilot services last week, of course, with that massive jump in plex prices, but I would say we have recovered pretty quickly. We are back where we started, and now you actually have to look for other influences, I think, than CCP sales or anything like that, to try to determine where this market is going. And I would say a lot is actually riding on what can CCP offer in the next few months as extra content, stuff to do for everyone, right? Those two races, I mean, you can go mining in the Galente Caldari race, and you can go explore in the Amar Minmatar race, and then just try to help out on the side of your choosing. So there is stuff to do for everyone, and hopefully they can basically keep that up, build a little bit of hype, and that should then translate into the market. It should be interesting. Next up, we have the minerals coming in at 11.55. Like that, as always, we'll start with titanium, and I hope it's still the case, because of course I did have to prep a little bit, but that we're still at 4 ISK for the sellers. Let's take a look at that in GDA itself. Yep, look at that, 4 ISK for the sellers, going up to 430 on the front page, 375 for the buyers, so really narrow margin, showing that there is decently strong demand for our titanium, which is really good news, because last week, actually, before the patch, I found my way back into mining. Actually spent a little bit of time mining in Iona as well, mostly focusing though on trying to grab some of that Mexalon. But yeah, titanium is at 4 ISK and is able to defend that for the week. That's actually pretty good news, a good price for the ASIC miners at the moment. In fact, best price in 1, 2, 3, 4 months. 4.5 months even, that they're getting from the sellers. Hopefully the volumes don't go too crazy and we can take a little bit of advantage of those slightly better prices, but it is a sign that there is strong demand, especially again that narrow margin. For pyrite, it's a little bit less good news. You can see those minimum prices taking a little bit of a dive, so we're down to 950 for the sellers and 844 for the buyers. Over 1 ISK on something that's less than 10 is a pretty wide margin still, so I think we're slightly oversupplied here, and that demand may actually be having a little bit of trouble when it comes to pyrite. But then we still have Mexalon for the ASIC miners, and then also from the high point at 88 ISK pretty much here a couple of weeks ago, we have to give back some ground, but if we can land on that 75, I'd say that's good news. Pretty much the best price for the whole year, kind of the reason why I went mining a little bit as well. 76 for the sellers, 75 for the buyers, and what a difference here again with pyrite. Look at that margin, 1 ISK margin on something that costs 76 ISK. Percentage wise, that's absolutely nothing. That does show that for Mexalon there is more demand than supply at the moment. I think 75 is pretty much defendable. Hopefully we can keep that up, and hopefully we basically also get a lot of destruction in these two races. Those ships will need to be replaced, that's more demand, and then we could take advantage of these higher prices. You don't necessarily need to be in the thick of things to be able to take advantage of large events like what CCP is doing at the moment. Just mining and bringing minerals to the market at the current prices, it's the best you've done for Mexalon and for titanium in the last 4 or 5 months. So that's actually pretty significant, and for a solo player like myself, that's also the angle that I like to play from time to time. I'll probably also look at maybe bringing in some ships and selling them close to that battlefront, although I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that would be doing that. Still, we can move on to low sec, which is Isogen first of all, of course, and that's still again a strange min-max range here on today's bar, but the daily average, I mean, we're stopping the bleeding and we're heading back towards 400 if today's is to be believed. 391 for the sellers, 371 for the buyers. Not a big margin. Again, I'd say there is decently strong demand, but the big difference here, still 10 million, 5 million, 100 million ISK. Someone pinned 394.5 for a little bit of time by putting up 100 million units, and that's a big difference compared to the volumes that the buyers are willing to do. So we are unfortunately going to be stuck below that 400 ISK, but today's average price, I think it does mean that we can from time to time bump into that 395, although that's still 40 to 50 million units to go through before we bump into that. So yeah, kind of unfortunate if you want, of course, if you're looking for those higher prices, but the Isogen is stuck at the moment below 400 ISK with some big volumes showing up. Then we have our Noxium chart that is trying to recover a little bit, but you can see here again in the last week we are clearly stabilizing. Daily averages already crossing the 5-day moving average, so we're probably cresting at the current range already. 850 for the sellers, 800 ISK for the buyers. It does have some volatility. This is almost, I mean, buy at like 700 ISK down here, sell for 840. That's sort of actually tradable. And that is something that could really change in those low-sec minerals if we can run out of those big reserves like in Isogen. That is clearly keeping things in check around that 400 ISK price range. But Noxium doesn't have that, and so Noxium has a far more flowy chart that really works with what's happening in the game, and maybe it even has a little bit of a predictive element to it as well. The market always tries to front run events, as you can see here that they probably expected a summer slump to come in, and it actually was maybe worse than what the market thought, as we went down to 710 from almost 1500 ISK in March before the summer. That's definitely quite significant, and now we see a little bit of a push up, a little bit of maybe a positive vibe of positive expectation when it comes to consumption of minerals, but it's still pretty damn muted. When it comes to nullsec though, it's a completely different story. Here there is no doubt who's in charge, and that is nullsec itself, and they have just brought the Zydrine prices back above 2000 ISK, 2279, so 2300 ISK for the sellers, 2145 for the buyers. Extremely expensive, massive winner on the 1 year chart as well, and pretty obvious that part of the thing here is the difference here is also going to be that nullsec is in control of a huge portion of the supply of Zydrine, and so they really also set the price. Basically, the sellers can ask what they want. The market has a very tough time reining in the amount of power that nullsec has over this one mineral. When it comes to megasite, it's a little bit different. Seems to also be slightly more stable, although today's average is already up quite significantly as well. The general trend is almost unstoppable, of course, but megasite does have extra resources that can come from Triglavian space, wormhole space, and so here there is some more competition in the supply, and so you get 1700 for the sellers, 1612 for the buyers. I think slightly better margin for something that's basically at a 1 year high point to get 228 for the sellers and 215 for the buyers. That's a really tiny margin that really does show that basically these guys, the sellers, are in full control, and the buyers have no choice but to put up buy orders right up to those sell orders. It's a little bit more breathing room here in the megasite market, also a little bit more stability when Zydrine here now is really trying to get that 2000 ISK price cemented. Pretty impressive to see though. Then we have our Morphite chart that's starting to go up. All right, might be a little bit of lower activity, lower mining, starting to push through and cause some problems in some supply lines. That's a possibility. Could be nullsec control as well. We're talking 50,000 now for the sellers and 43,000 for the buyers. Just remember, this is tied to the Tech 2 economy, not the Tech 1 economy. And so for those like myself that have been buying Tech 2 ships all summer, this could be a first sign that things may turn around there as well. Next up, the PI market at 20 minutes. Let's take a look at that, and I think here the trend will still be the same. If minerals can go up here on this slightly higher activity, I personally think that so could PI, but here is broadcast nodes, and pretty much almost a 1-year high point. We started the year up to 2 million, and then this looks pretty sharp as well, but we still have momentum. Look at that 5-day moving average going straight through the 175 million, 185 to 19 million for the sellers very quickly, 2 million almost coming into view, and buyers at 175 million almost, they are forced up to this price range as well. So a nice uptick for broadcast nodes. I think there is building happening as well. Perhaps there's also faction warfare building that's coming into play. If you want to dominate a race like that, you need a big group, you need organization, and then eventually you need that to be able to escalate into dreadnoughts, carriers, and things like that. Even in faction warfare, those will play a role if enough people take part in all of that. So maybe what CCP is starting to do here as well could drive demand for bigger ships and thus demand for even more PI. Let's see what construction blocks are doing. Basically flat for the week, I would say, although those minimum prices are definitely going back up towards that 10k. We're at 9,750 for the sellers and 9,500 for the buyers. Yep, exactly. Buyers have come back into the market, and while they've been able to bring the price down below 10,000 disk, they have closed that gap already, showing that demand is still strong here. Then we've got coolants losing a little bit of ground, but staying above 11,000 disk is still a really awesome price for coolants. 11,760 for the sellers, above 11,000 for the first buyer, 10,990 for the second. This is still a very strong demand, and of course the very high range for coolants that just made a 1-year high point. So that you need to give back a little bit from a 1-year high point is definitely normal. Enriched uranium tried to get back below 10k last week. Look at that average, just a quick bounce back above it, showing that people are wanting that PI material stuff at the moment. 11,000 for the sellers, 10,250 for the buyers as well. Integrity response drones. Oh, those minimum prices are starting to test that 2.5 million, but do they have the patience? 2.7 million for the sellers, 2.4 million for the buyers. For now, the buyers are trying to bring integrity response drones down by opening a bit of a margin there. Maybe a little bit less demand starting to form, but the sellers are not budging, and they may perhaps know what they're doing. Let's see in the upcoming weeks if buyers are forced up, or if they can bring in or be patient enough, basically, that supply will start to compete to lower prices. At the moment, I'm seeing this as basically a stalemate, with most of the battles won by the sellers. Then we get our mechanical parts staying above 10,000 disk. Also a little bit of pressure at the tail end, but let's see how long that lasts, because 10,640 and 10,200 for the buyers that are starting to come in. This again to me shows that there is strong demand coming into PI at the moment. Miniature electronics basically had a 1-year high plateau of almost 2 months in August and September, going above 1250. That does tend to bring in a little bit of interest from sellers as well. We're still at 12,000 and 11,400 for the buyers. That's just a 600 margin on something that's 12,000 for a refined PI material. That's like pretty damn good of a price. So again, that demand at the moment is definitely there. Nano factories pretty much flat for the week, 900,000 almost for the sellers and 870 for the buyers. That's a really tiny margin, so the upwards pressure could actually be building there. Organic mortar applicators, 1-year high point. It's only 900,000 disks, right? Compared to the 2.5 million from integrity response drones, it's not that great, but the chart is nice. 915 for the sellers, 820 for the buyers. Bit of margin opening up there, but again, it is a 1-year high point, so that's pretty impressive. Recursive computing modules. Bit of pressure for the week, but easily within the range of the last couple of months. Almost 900k for the sellers, above 800k for the buyers. Same story. And then robotics, that's interesting as well. We touch 70,000, we get minimum prices below that for a couple of days, and we're back to 75,000 almost for the sellers and 73 500 for the buyers. Narrow margin, strong demand. It's really a bit surprising that despite a summer slump that's quite significant in the player numbers, that PI is doing this well. Rocket fuels, bit of pressure, but again, the range 11,350 to 10,800, that is a very good price. Self-harmonizing power cores, slowly still creeping up towards that 225 million. Not able to really break out of that, but might be happening right now because we're at 235 million for the sellers. I think that's more than integrity response drones. No, those are at 27. So my mistake, but almost 2.4 million coming into play, and then it's 2.5 for the one after that, and a 2.1 million for the seller. So there is demand, and supply has to come from somewhere for self-harmonizing power cores. We're starting to run dry. We could move into a higher range on this. Smart fab units, 70 above 70k, 66,000 for the sellers. Yeah, this one is a little bit not as clear as the others because of the small volumes that you get on a daily basis. So that does happen. It's not a completely uniform market, of course. Sterile conduits staying healthily above a million, 1.2 for the sellers, above a million for the buyers. Supercomputers, another one of those. You can see those volumes drop off to nothing from time to time. So it's not that great of a market, but it's still 82k for the sellers and first buyer 73. So that's the problem here. It's such a small market that, for instance, one buy order of a couple thousand at 73,000 can prop up this market for a bit. But once that's gone, we dive down to 66, and then you're back straight to that bad average or lower average, you could say. So these can have very big swings and very bad periods, very good periods as well. But they're not as uniform as something that's basically filled and traded almost a million times a day, like with the coolants. So that was supercomputers. We got synthetic oil, also not that great in volumes. It's 8,200 for the sellers, 7,700 almost for the buyers. So that one is not as popular as some of the others. Synthetic synapses tied to implants, going back to more than 100,000 disc, 110,000 for the sellers, 94,000 for the buyers. We're basically running dry on this. My thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is not necessarily implant drop related, but this is probably related to the two races that are happening. It is in low sec. There's definitely going to be podding happening in faction warfare because those guys, they are fighting those sides. Yeah, you might want some implants for faster hacking, maybe faster mining as well, so that you can get out of dodge more quickly. But it is risky business, so you will lose ships and pods from time to time. I think that's basically what's driving up synthetic synapses, and then transcranial microcontrollers able to do an opposite move. That's kind of weird, but it's also relative because we were at a high 1 year high point range above 100,000 disc, which we hadn't done for the whole year. We're now settling at pretty much 100k for the sellers and 86k for the buyers. Water cooled CPU, another one with those not so great volumes, and the worst price that we have in the list for refined PI materials for a long time, right? Look at that, hovering around 5,000 disc, but look at this, 8.7 for the sellers and 4.5 for the buyers. So huge margin that opened up here. On a bit of a lack of supply, demand remains decently steady. And then we get our wetware mainframes that are basically making another 1 year high point, matching the price from a year ago. 1.8 million for the sellers, 1.6 for the buyers. Another pretty damn strong week for PI. Whatever it is that needs it, my speculation is that it is for larger ships, capital ships. It is running pretty well compared to the current supply. Next up, advanced movements, but first a quick drink. There we go, so that's 29.35. And well, for advanced movements, the one thing that has me a little bit worried, if you're looking for those lower and lower prices, So that could be an indication for higher price, is of course that more fights bump up to 50k. So let's see if we see something similar here. First of all, crystalline carbonite for Galente. No, we do not. We get back below 100 ISK substantially. 95 for the sellers, 88 for the buyers. Then we have Caldari, which is always have to look for that one. Titanium carbide. No, we're not looking at a reversal just yet in these advanced mode materials, dropping off towards 100 ISK. Really low price on the 1 year chart, not the lowest point, but still 111 to 103 is not great. We're stemming the bleeding here on a little bit of buying, but this after losing almost 50 ISK, 40 ISK, that's definitely not great. For Minmatar, we've got Fernite Carbide, that's also now hovering below 100 ISK, slow and steady, but it's just unstoppable, 97 to 93 on that one. And then for Amar, we've got a slightly different picture. They just bump up towards a 120 range, but you can see at the tail end, pressure is right back, 115 to 114. So the carbides are already telling us a story that supplies are back and they're willing to bring prices back down, testing previous lows, at least getting pretty close to them. Metamaterials next. For Galente, it's photonic metamaterials. All right, yeah, slight uptick, but basically after we broke 6250, everything just died down for a bit. Slight buying happening, but not able to really move the price too much. 6,800 to 6,278. Compare that to the high point for the year. That's not a great price. Non-linear for Caldari, also hovering at the low range here, 11,570 to 11,000. So that's also like really low in price, quite available. And then we've got Minmatar, which is plasmonic, that's below 1250. Yep, still a little bit better than what you would expect for what's normally a smaller market. Minmatar is not the most popular faction in EVE Online, but they have a couple of really strong Tech 2 ships, I think, that are part of doctrines, so they can command a slightly higher price. And then Terahertz Metamaterials making its way back to 10,000 ISK, still below that on the sellers and almost below 9,000 ISK, in fact below 9,000 ISK for the buyers. Pretty big margin here as well. So for the ship related stuff, carbides and metamaterials, we're still seeing a lot of pressure, very low prices and oversupply basically. Let's see if this is confirmed in the other advanced materials. Fermionic condensates not moving anywhere, stuck at the 1 year low point range. Then we've got the ferrogel chart, same story. I mean, little recovery after reaching 13,500, a slight bump here, and since then flat with pressure, so it's really not going anywhere. Fullerized are back below 500 ISK. Hypersynaptic fibers just make their way back to 5,000 ISK, but are not able to do so. Sellers, look at that, 4,998. And so what was previously below 5,000 was a buy signal for the market. Now we're basically structurally below that 5,000 ISK range. Nano transistors, a little bit of a bump as well, staying below 3K, and the pressure is right back. Phenolic composites, 1 year low point right here, a little bit of a recovery, very slow, very steady, not willing to go back to even close to 1,000 ISK. We're still stuck at 950 for the sellers. Pressurized oxidizers, right, also seeing some pressure here, not able to get anywhere close to 10K. Reinforced carbon fibers, slightly better chart, but the bad news is touched 10,000 ISK, and then the pressure is right back. We're already down to 9.6 for the sellers, and buyers are below 9,000 ISK, so they're already really pulling to get reinforced carbon fibers back down. Ceramic fibers made it back to 300 ISK. We saw that once or twice in the last couple of months as well. Let's see how long that lasts. I suspect it will not be very long. So yeah, advanced materials, just like PI, actually in the same story so far. The biggest difference I'm seeing is a little bit of extra demand in the minerals and some big reserves that found their way on the Isogen market. So the impact on Tech 2 ships, well, Morphite could have a bit of an impact, but I'm not sure to expect a lot different than basically still really low prices for Tech 2. That's coming in at 34.45. like that. So let's take a look. Here is the basilisk, and then I'm also my holdings, so I'll keep a quick eye on that. So yeah, photonic metamaterials not doing too great. Do I still have buy orders? Anything like that? I mean, I have more stuff, but at one point late in my buying, I decided to keep them. But yeah, don't have any data on this. But all right, here is the basilisk. You can see did a little bit of a bump again as well after touching 100 million ISK. Managed to stay there for about 10 days, and right now pressure is mounting down to 114 for the first seller, 105 million for the buyers. Then we get the Cerberus, made its way back above 150. Let's see how long that lasts with a 153 for the sellers, 148 for the buyers. All right, slightly stronger demand there. That's actually impressive. If it could stay above 150, I would say maybe a first sign that a bottom is trying to be formed is here, but next week could tell us a very different story, I think. Because everything else, as far as I can tell, here is the curse, still stuck below 130. There's not that much to say that there is no demand for the ships, and there's desperate sellers. Look at that last 24 hours, almost a full page here as well, going down from 124 million to 122.7. So they're definitely pretty damn desperate. Damnation just steadily landing on 250 million, so they're trying to keep us above that 250 at 257, buyers at 253. It's still a big struggle. You can see that we've just gone down and down in the last month or so for the damnation as well, so this could really break either way, but at the moment we're basically at really low prices. Deacon, right, below 15 million and just stuck there, 14.5 to 14 million. So the good news is that the Deacon had a tradable bump up to 30 million. That's quite significant. Buy below 15, 30 million. That's a pretty damn good margin. But the response has just been too much. The market was like, whoa, Deacons, everyone wants Deacons, let's bring those to the market, let's make some extra as well. And so they crashed this down to a 1 year low point at the moment, and we've been stuck there for almost a week. Then we get the Eagle, slight uptick in the last couple of days, but really also trading at the lowest range for the entire year. EOS, same story, trading at, let's see if I can get a line to come here, 230 million and below. So that's also pretty much the lowest range. The Aries, slight bump, but the problem is that, and I mentioned this in the last few EVE talks as well, is that those bumps are becoming more and more shallow. They're having a tougher and tougher time to make anything tradable happen. So here we touched 30 million, we make our way just back to 35 million on a little bit of buying, but no one is going to go crazy and push us back to 40, 45 million, really buy everything out in order to get a tradable bump or anything like that going. I think also that those that would have the pockets to do that, or at the moment, like, we don't have to do this, because if we're doing it for profits, then the problem is we're not going to be able to sell that many of them before others come in and bring in their ships and just crash the price too quickly. So you're going to be stuck with a loss. And those that want to buy them to use them have something, I think, that there is this massive supply. It's much better to not spook the market, keep buying slowly, keep that price in check. Over the longer run, we're just gonna be way better off than pushing everything by buying too much too quickly. So yeah, it's basically sort of dying out, I think, when it comes to volatility. So you can see before we managed to do 70 million, 50 million on a couple of occasions with a double top, and then now, yeah, we're struggling. 5-day moving average able to get to 46 million, and now we're back under pressure from the flycatcher, already down to 44. And so yeah, it's just too quick, right? Look at that, the amounts as well. On any opportunity, there's plenty of them out there that are willing to sell at any better price, very quickly bringing this back down. So here's the Guardian, right? Same story, high point 200 million, 150, 150, 130, and now we're not even reaching that 130 anymore. 116 for the sellers, 110 for the buyers. You could have bought the Guardian for less than 100 million 2 weeks ago. Then we've got the Heretic, again above 40, only just, and now we're not even making that anymore as we're starting to come back down. The Hound is just slowly edging up from that 15 million. It's not even a spike anymore. Ikitursa, all right, a first one that does have a little bit of a spike. So we went to 440 and we're currently selling for 580 million. That's pretty good profit. My theory here again would be the events. Maybe there's like bosses or structures or things like that need to be bashed. Ikitursa is super powerful, especially in an organized fleet. I think the Strixhaven weapon systems can really punch above their weight quite effectively, and so I think here a little bit of extra interest on the Ikitursa might be coming from the event. I would expect this maybe to happen from the Ishtar as well, considering how low it is, but no. My favorite ship is not doing that well. Pretty much another 1 year low point, stuck at below 120 for the sellers, and still look at that 20, 24, 30, 25 Ishtars were just completely crushing it with oversupply. And so again, you can ask yourself, well, would any big alliance be interested in a large fleet of Ishtars that they could buy on the cheap? Well, they could already buy at least 100 below 123 million, and then it's another 64 in the waiting here. But why would you do this when you can just slowly keep racking up half a dozen, 10 of them probably on a daily basis that you can buy below 120? Why would you all of a sudden push for a big fleet, push the price up even by 5 million? You just don't have to in the current market. You can just sit back, slowly buy, and build up your forces that way at a much better price. We get the Kirin landing as well, really low point, and look at those min-max prices. Just any volatility is being snuffed out of the market. Manticore a little bit better, managed to make its way back to 20 million though, so a little bit better. Is from below 15 million to 20 million. We are at the moment at 21 almost for the sellers, 16 for the buyers. The Nemesis trying to get back to 15, not even succeeding. We've got the Nighthawk that made its way to 300 mil. So that's again, look at those highs, they just keep going down. And so we bumped up to 300 million at the start of the month. So that was pretty much still tradable, right? Buy at a really low point, probably 230 million or something like that. Sell for 300. A couple of people might have managed to do that. And then now the pressure is back on. And unfortunately, I think we'll break the 250. Back on the downside, and then we won't be bumping back to 300 million. That's my personal expectation if I look at how things go, unless of course CCP eventually steps in, which is still my longer term expectation. The Oneros, after being below 100 million for several weeks, makes its way back to 116, and then the problem, those buyers are still at 92 million. And so here we get 20 of them coming in. That's gonna immediately put a stop to the increase in price. Anything new is gonna put up pressure. There just isn't enough demand for what's available out there. And so I think we'll just get back to 100 million pretty quickly on this one. The Purifier also a little bit of a bump, but again, not able to break 20 million. So that's, in my opinion, not really tradable. Then we get the Rook. That one had a tradable bump to 200 million not that long ago. There are of course exceptions. Not everything moves in a straight line or in the same line. But the problem that you are having, in my opinion, here again, is when you get a good opportunity, especially in a larger ship, you get massive supply. So we're stuck here, 11, 11, 14, 11, another 10 here that brought us down from 220 down to 133 million at the moment for the sellers. And then that's what's really takes out that volatility, because that min-max range is just absolutely terrible. There's nothing happening in this market anymore. We get the Saber next, also stuck below 40 million, it's not going anywhere. Scalpel, slight uptick to 15 million, which I would say is like, you know, the price we've been at for quite a while. So same story basically here. Now what happened, we were stuck at 15 million, we finally broke down a little bit, and here over the course of a couple of weeks you could have bought close to 10 million on quite a few occasions. Then we jump up to 20 million, so very nice trade opportunity. And what's the market response? We're just gonna flood everything, bring us back down to the lower average, closer to that 10 million ISK, and then we're stuck here for several weeks. And what's the next bump? hardly above 215 million, and so not tradable anymore. Then we've got the scimitar, yeah, slight upside here in the last couple of weeks or so, but again from a 1 year low point at 100 million, that's not saying much. Sleipnir really flat around 250 million, Vagabond really flat around 150. And then finally, the Zarmast could see a bump. Yeah, the Zarmast saw a bump back to 400 million. So maybe a little bit of speculation, but a very careful market. Again, lower and lower highs. It's harder and harder to get that volatility into the Tech 2 market. That's basically still oversupplied. I think partly because of, again, the advanced boom mats, that increased potential for the moon mining has just made these very, very cheap and very available. Which is not great news, of course, for our next segment, which is the Tech 3 ships, because Tech 2 has those amazing resistances. They're really strong, and going at the current prices, they are competing with what Tech 3 ships can do. That's coming in at 45.55. Like that. So let's get going. Here is the Confessor. Really pretty flat slide uptick in the last week or so. I think that maybe we'll take a look actually at faction frigates next as well, and I'll see if it takes gas to make them. But Confessor, yeah, flat 48 million to 42 million. So this is not even a good price, right? A good price for Confessor is below 40 million. So there's enough interest in there to keep the market from really crashing down in price. It's also the production cost, right? You just have to get that gas that is more expensive in order to make Confessors. And then there's the value proposition. So the volumes are just really gone for this market, and that is, I think, because Tech 2 is just so much better in that value proposition. Hecate is actually breaking down below 50 million at this point as well. So below 50 for the sellers, still 46 million for the buyers. I still think it's production cost that's keeping us from having a real crash or a real buy opportunity. And maybe I'll write that down for next week, I think. Gas, so we can take a look at that, because I think the Jackdaw is doing the same, right? Getting back below 50 million as well. So to me, it does feel like there's a little bit more breathing room on the building side of things, but not by too much. And then we get this Vapel that's already, because it's really not popular, not doing well, and that one is stuck. 47 million for the sellers, 42 for the buyers. But again, look at those volumes. That's just completely gone. When this Vapel went above 50 million, everyone said, no, I'm not buying this Vapel for 50 million. I'd rather buy a Tech 2 ship then. So that's, I think, really the problem for the tactical destroyers at the moment. If CCP wants to change this dynamic, which I'm not sure that they do, of course, then they really need to, I think, look into Tech 2. If they're happy with how available and how cheap it is, they could also look into Tech 3 as well. It's less stuff to do. Give them something that really makes them unique, that could bring back more interest into them. And who knows what happens, of course, with that new technology that they're basically going to give the empires through all of these events. We really don't know where things are going. It could be tied to Tech 3, of course. So we'll see what happens, of course. But at the moment, unfortunately for the tactical destroyers, they are not at all in vogue, and they're stuck at basically pretty high prices because of the production costs. For the cruisers next, here is the Legion chart dropping off. Definitely a 1 year low point for the 5-day moving average. Even the buyers, I think, are at a 1 year low point, 173 to 160 million. A PvE event or something like that could make this a buy opportunity. I would call this a buy opportunity. You're buying below 160, and actually no, so I'm not sure why we're getting these many prices. Or basically that must have been filled in the last couple of days, so we're probably just too late then to buy below 160, but it's still pretty damn cheap. We're just too late, unfortunately. You can see here how those daily averages are starting to go back up, and we just crossed that 5-day moving average. So here we're back in the phase where grabbing something from the buy orders is not that easy. Still, the chart is pretty damn low, of course. Then we've got the Loki, a little bit of pressure, but still able to hover around to 190. 186 to 178, so that's an in-between zone, not that interesting I think. Then we get the Proteus staying above 180 as well, minimum price is not dropping off enough, so that's another no. And then the Tengu is actually moving sideways on a new range below 180 million, but again, look at the daily averages of the last 3 days. We have recrossed the 5-day moving average. So I think this buy opportunity is basically over as well for the Tengu. That's now at 175 to 161. And let's see if that is the 160. Yeah, a couple of days ago, you could have bought below 160, apparently even close to 150 just 2 days ago. So that's over, but we'll see if they have enough momentum to bring the price back to, let's say, a 190 to make this a tradable opportunity. That depends on a lot more factors as well. But for the Tech 3 market in general, it's still the same story. The destroyers are not doing well because of their price proposition, and the Tech 3 cruisers have some volatility in them, but uniformly they're under pressure at the moment. So is this a buy opportunity or is this a realignment of the market? That, of course, only the future can tell. And then for the extra product for the week, we are going to take a look at the faction frigates, because there might just be a couple of new ones in there. 5110. Like that. So it should go ships, frigates, and then faction frigates, and we will start with the pirate faction frigates just to get a feel of what they're doing. All right, Astero, 110 million in the last week up. Well, that's actually probably potentially pretty normal. You've got basically a faction ship, so Tech 1, you have a covered ops capability, and you've got the whole event in Minmatar Amar space that's tied around exploration. So the Astero is probably going to be a pretty popular ship up there. Then we've got the Crewer, that's also back above 80 million for the sellers. Yep, above 80 million for the sellers, so pretty expensive as well. Daredevil, yeah, 90-ish, something like that. 100 million in fact for the sellers, making its way back up there as well. Dramiel, 80, maybe slightly better, but still well above average. Garmer just made its way back below 100 million on a couple of sellers, but it's not by much, so this is also still very expensive. Succubus, let's take a look at that, just made its way back above 100 million as well. And then we've got the Worm, that's also going for 100 million ISK, so super expensive faction frigates. Also look at, since the start of the year, at those volumes taking a big dive because of, it's again that gas problem, if you consider the problem, of course. People that are making and selling these are probably looking way better in the faction, in these frigates than in the tactical destroyers though. And then what we're really here for, here are the Navy faction frigates that should have a couple of let's see if I can find them. So I think it's like, no, it's not the Griffin, like the Heron Navy issue. There we go. So that's a new one. And then, well, we'll take a look. Here is the Caldari Navy Hookbill. So Caldari is actually winning out, and I think this is at least in the last 5-6 months or so, reflected in this price that actually went below 10 million not that long ago. We're at 12 million. I think here now we're actually going to get a bump due to the event, because of course some LP is probably going to be saved up in order to get those blueprint copies for the new ships. But overall, Caldari is definitely doing really well. Federation Navy Comet then, the exact opposite, stuck at that 20 million range, and also going up a little bit in the last couple of days, again because people will probably be hoarding some of their LP. So if you have Federation Navy Comets that you maybe bought on the cheap here in June down to 10 million, then this is a great time to be selling them. Imperial Navy Slicer, again Amar doing really well. So that's a 10 million range for the Imperial Navy Slicer. And then we get a Republic Fleet Firetail. That's at 1250. So that's a little bit more of a mixed picture on this one. But you can see that we do just come from a pretty high point on the full 1 year chart for the Republic Fleet Firetail. Skybreaker, considered a Navy faction frigate, 50 million. So definitely the odd one out, a little bit different, 66 to 53 million. And you can see that someone went for Skybreaker Fleet, I think. Lots of volumes, high prices, willing to go above 75 million. and then we finally recovered on more supplies. Crucifier Navy issue is, and I'm actually, it should be available here, so let's just keep going. Slight uptick. Look at the volumes here as well. I think this will be event related, right? Because in Minmatar Amar space you actually have a gate that is restricted to Tech 1 and Navy and faction frigates, if I'm not mistaken. So Crucifier Navy issue definitely in vogue all of a sudden. Look at those volumes, and does a bump in price, but up until that point they were relatively cheap, and so Amar was doing really well. We get our Griffin Navy issue for Caldari, same story, even below 10 million at the moment. So they're celebrating their victories with the low LP costs and thus cheaper ships. Then our first new one here is the Heron Navy issue, and currently one is trying to sell it for 700 million, and people are willing to pony up 100 billion ISK to have one of those early Heron Navy issues. So this is definitely what I wanted to show you guys as well. At the introduction of especially like new ships, you've got crazy starting prices. It will take some time, especially considering this is now being drip fed through the events for this to stabilize, but eventually we'll get this into a normal rotation, and I personally am willing to wait it out a little bit. We get an Imicus Navy issue that is not available on the market, so also a difference. Heron from Caldari, they're winning. Someone is willing to depart with that one now, but Imicus Navy issue, not enough rewards at the moment for the Galente side of things, or unless it's up here. Let's take a look at that as well for the Heron. Yeah, it's just not there yet for Galente. They'll have to do a little bit better, I think, in the race, and commit a little bit more if they want to make that happen. Magnate Navy issue, so same story here on the chart. Availability is 0. People are willing to go to 40 million, so that's probably something that for early price checks they're willing to do. And then we get a Molus Navy issue, so that should still be a full chart, but Galente, so 25 million on the charts, very expensive. Probe Fleet issue is another new one, not available, 40 for the buyers. Vigil Fleet issue, 15 million, definitely the average to high average for the last 6 months or so for the Vigil Fleet issue. And then I still wanted to take a look at this as well. What does this cost? Industry requirements. Oh, that's interesting. It doesn't take any gas. So it's just a little bit of... oh no, that's what it actually... I might still be wrong on that, because you gotta go to the blueprint to see the cost. That was the... if you would reprocess it. But yeah, it's just minerals. Nope, there we go. There we go. So that's going to put more pressure on gas consumption, because it does have those life support backup units, auto integrity preservation seals, and trigger Neuralink conduits. I am in fact going to take a quick look at the price of that. Yep, there we go. Very, very expensive stuff, and adding those faction frigates won't do any good to those prices. It's just going to be more, especially these, I think, because they are exploration. There is interest. It's a jump up from Tech 1 in capabilities, and it's not the Astero. That's potentially kind of crazy, so people are willing to pony up quite a lot. Take a quick look at this. The integrity preservation seal, that one is actually doable and quite stable. And do I still have the info one somewhere? I don't think so. Take a look at that again then on the Imicus. So a little bit of minerals, but then also this stuff that is also decently doable. So this could be part of why our destroyers, tactical destroyers, have stabilized as well. But overall, yeah, interesting introduction. Definitely you have something to do, regardless of which empire you want to support, or if, like me, you're more of an outside force that does plan to take a little bit of advantage of everything that's happening there. It is starting back up in EVE Online, and it has its first few signs of impact on the market as well. That's it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.